I still remember sitting in a bar when she walked in. Tall boots, burnt caramel hair, scanning the room like she was waiting for something that might never come. She ordered wine, didn't touch it, just swirled it like a spell she couldn't break. And you know what? She wasn't looking for someone. She was haunted by someone. You could see it in her jaw tight, like it had forgotten how to relax. You could see it in her smile forced, just enough to say I'm fine, but not enough to mean it. Some men are forgotten the second they leave. Others burn themselves into the silence. And here's the truth: the man who disappears without explaining, who exits without permission, who lets the questions linger unanswered, that's the one she remembers. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to become that man, and why being unforgettable means being untouchable. You don't slam the door. You don't scream. You don't explain your feelings like she deserves a manual to your mind. You leave like the sea leaves the shore slowly, with rhythm, with power. You vanish in such a way that she questions if you were ever real to begin with. You see, most men crumble when they sense she's slipping. They overcommunicate. They plead. They perform. They overstay. And the moment you start explaining yourself, you've already lost her. Because what she really craves isn't an explanation. It's the mystery, the unbroken question, the ache of not knowing why. It's not closure she wants. It's tension. Tension keeps her connected. Closure lets her forget. You were taught that leaving someone without a word is cruel, that it's respectful to offer clarity, communication, emotional accountability. But here's the reality. No one wants to say out loud if she didn't earn your soul while you were there. She doesn't get a map to it on your way out. If she took your presence for granted, your silence is the only truth she deserves. So you stop texting. Not because you're playing a game, but because you're finished playing one. You stop giving updates. Not to hurt her, but because your life isn't a product she subscribed to. You walk not to make her chase, but because standing still in confusion was killing your edge. There's power in a man who walks away without flinching, without speeches, without drama. Just an empty space where he used to be. And the more she tries to decode it, the more her mind loops back to you. She replays every word. She questions every tone. She remembers things you forgot you even said. Because you didn't give her the one thing she thought she was entitled to an ending. You think you need closure to heal? You don't. She thinks she needs answers to move on. She won't. The strongest moves are the ones that leave people talking long after you've stopped showing up. You don't need to be explained. You need to be felt. And that only happens when your absence carries more weight than your words ever did. So you disappear, not as a tactic, but as a truth. Because when a man knows his value, he doesn't offer explanations, he offers consequences. She didn't listen when you spoke. But silence. Silence screams. It fills rooms. It drives thoughts like knives into soft places. She remembers the man who didn't beg to be understood, who didn't crumble when ignored, who didn't wait for her to feel ready. She remembers the man who walked when it was his time and never looked back. You see, walking away isn't weak. Staying to explain is, because the moment you try to justify your exit, you admit that you need her to approve of your departure. You want her to say, I get it, but she won't. She'll twist it, dissect it, weaponize it. So you give her nothing. Not out of malice, but out of self-respect. The man who walks away without explaining doesn't just haunt her thoughts. He rewrites the standard. Every man after him is compared to the one who left with dignity, mystery, and finality. And none of them quite measure up. Because they try too hard. Because they reveal too much. Because they need too many answers. But you needed none. You left the conversation unfinished. You left the door half closed. You left the candle burning in the corner of her mind, flickering every time she hears your name or finds a shirt that smells like something she forgot to let go of. That's the kind of man who lives forever in the shadows of her memory. And the best part, you didn't even have to say a word. She's lying awake again, staring at the crack on her ceiling. It's nothing just paint peeling where the water once leaked, but tonight it's a doorway. A reminder. Her breath is slow, like she's trying not to disturb the ghost. and you are the ghost. She replays the last time she saw you. The way your shoulders didn't turn back. The way you didn't hesitate. There wasn't a dramatic exit. No door slam. No final word. Just a pause. A glance. And then absence. She told herself it was temporary. She convinced herself you'd return with reasons. But reasons never came. Only silence. Silence that sounded a lot like power. Why didn't he say anything, she whispers into the dark. Why did he just leave? Her friend tells her you were emotionally immature, that you were too afraid to talk like an adult. She nods like she agrees, but inside something twists. Because the truth is, your silence didn't feel weak. It felt intentional. Controlled. Like you knew something she didn't. And now she can't stop wondering what it was. That's the part that stays with her. Not your words, not your touch, but the precision of your exit. She talks about you like an unsolved riddle. You aren't the man who begged. You're the one who refused to explain because he didn't need to be understood to be remembered. She checks her phone again. Not because she expects a message she knows you won't text. That's what makes her look. Because she can't believe you're really that gone. No closure, no check-in, just gone. Like a tide that took something precious when it pulled back. Her mind is no longer trying to let go of you. It's orbiting you. Because the way you left wasn't an abandonment. It was a revelation. You didn't disappear to punish her. You disappeared because there was nothing left to say. Most men try to prove they were right. They argue, cry, plead. They need to be seen. They need to be heard. But when you left, you didn't need any of that. And that's what carved your silhouette into her psychology. You didn't collapse under her absence. You expanded into it. Now, every man who comes after you talks too much. They try too hard. They overcompensate with words like a clown trying to win a queen. And she smiles, nods, kisses them, then rolls over and wonders what you're doing. If you've forgotten her, if she ever mattered, if your silence was peace or punishment, if you're better without her, if you ever looked back, you don't explain, because explanation is a transaction. It implies she has the right to weigh your reasons and decide if they're good enough. But the man who walks away without explaining doesn't offer explanations. He offers distance. He trusts that space speaks louder than logic, and she hears it. Oh, she hears it. It echoes in her when she's in the shower and your scent rises from nowhere. It whispers in her when she hears a song you once hummed. It lingers when someone wears the same cologne. She wonders if you ever cared. But deep down, she knows only a man who cared could leave so completely. The ones who didn't care linger too long. They linger for sex, for drama, for ego. You didn't. You left nothing behind except questions, and questions are what the soul clings to. She remembers you because you let her wonder. You didn't fill in the blanks. You became the blank. She's still trying to draw the outline. And meanwhile, you've become quieter, sharper, not colder, but clearer. You've learned that some women don't deserve an explanation, not because they're bad, but because they stopped listening long before you stopped speaking. They heard your words but ignored your silences. So you gave them the only answer they couldn't interrupt your absence. She thought love was attention, that affection was words, that care looked like chasing. But you rewrote the script. You taught her that strength is stillness, that letting go without announcing it is power, that walking away without fanfare is a flex only few men can afford, and you paid the price for it. You walked through that fire. You faced the fear of disappearing and didn't flinch. Now you're the man she can't forget because you refused to be remembered on her terms. She didn't get to decide when you left, and she doesn't get to decide what that means. She texts you, maybe once. Something casual. Hope you're good. You read it and let it fade. Because you are good. You're better than good. You're free. And freedom doesn't reply. Not to breadcrumbs. Not to half-hearted invitations. Not to women who only want you once they can't reach you. And in her quietest moments, she knows that's why you left. Not to punish her. not to manipulate her, but because you were finally done explaining to someone who never really listened. You weren't a tantrum. You were an ending. Here's the part that breaks her later, when no one's around to see it. It's not that you walked away. It's how cleanly you did it. How unshaken. No scattered pieces. No digital trails. No emotionally dramatic closure talk to circle back to. Just stillness. Like a lake sealed in winter. She expected something: tears, confusion, a final confrontation. But what she got was a quiet that made her check the mirror. Was she even worth a goodbye? That's the brutality of true masculine detachment. It doesn't slam. It doesn't bleed. It doesn't announce itself like a desperate parade. It withdraws. And in that withdrawal, a mirror is left behind. A mirror that forces her to see herself not as the victim, but as someone who let something rare slip between her fingers. She rewrites the story in her head. He was emotionally unavailable. He was immature. He didn't know how to communicate. All nice lines. Lines that make her feel in control again. But none of it lands clean. Because it wasn't chaos you left behind, it was silence. And silence doesn't lie. Honestly, you didn't ghost her. You graduated from her. And deep down, she knows it. You became a consequence. Not a reaction. Not a warning. A quiet, cold shift in the universe that left her wondering if she'd misunderstood you from the start. Because a man who walks without explaining is a man who's not trying to be understood. He's trying to be aligned, and alignment doesn't beg. She remembers the little things now, not just the way you kissed her or touched her or made her laugh. She remembers the time you said, "I don't repeat myself. I don't." She laughed when you said it. Thought it was cute. But now it haunts her. Because it was true. You told her with your energy long before your absence that you were drifting. She just thought you'd orbit back. She thought she had time. Women always think they have time until time is taken from them. You don't teach her anything with your words. You teach her everything with your absence, and because absence has weight. And when it comes from a man who stood tall, gave purely, and left quietly, it carries more power than anything you could have texted at 2 a.m. That's the difference between boys who run and men who walk. Boys escape, men evaporate. You weren't afraid. You were finished. And that finish didn't need a monologue. It didn't need a mutual agreement. It didn't need a goodbye hug or a dinner full of forced closure. Closure is for people who want to be friends afterward. You didn't want friendship. You wanted freedom. There's a difference. You gave her everything until giving started to rot something inside you. You stayed honest until honesty was ignored. And then you left not to be chased, but because staying would have required betraying yourself. Let that sink in. You didn't leave her. You left the version of you that tolerated being misunderstood. Most men try to exit a woman's life like they're tiptoeing out of a room without waking her up. They hope to come back later. They want the door half open. They want her love without her chaos. You shut the door. You locked it. You walked down the hall. And you didn't leave a forwarding address. That's why she remembers you. Because you're the man she never got to finish. Her ego has healed. Maybe. But her soul, it's still catching up. Because you weren't a fling. You weren't a lesson. You were a fracture. The man who walks away without explaining doesn't just disappear. He transforms. He becomes part of her inner architecture. Her next love won't understand why she flinches at silence or obsesses over subtle signs. He won't know that it's not him she's responding to. It's the memory of you. The man who left not because he hated her, but because he finally respected himself. And that, right there, is the part that haunts her most. It wasn't punishment. It was peace. You didn't exit like a storm. You exited like a king, and kings don't explain their absence. They leave their throne empty and let the kingdom wonder. They told you that real men explain themselves, that walking away without a word is immature, that it leaves the other person confused and damaged. They told you to sit down, open up, and have a mature conversation. Here's the myth: you owe her closure. Here's the truth: you owe her nothing she refused to hear while you were present. A woman who dismissed your honesty doesn't get clarity once you've gone quiet. A woman who toyed with your stability doesn't deserve a speech when you choose to reclaim it. When you were there available, real, open, she treated your presence like a background hum. White noise. Predictable, familiar. But now, your silence is not a hum. It's a hole, a vacuum, a disturbance in the atmosphere she built her comfort on. And it doesn't fade, because you didn't storm out with emotion. You disappeared with intent. She said you were too much. Now she says you're missing. That's not irony. That's consequence. You can't teach someone to value presence with words. You teach it through absence, through boundaries enforced with silence, not sentences, through dignity, not debates. And if you really loved her, that's exactly why you had to walk. Because love isn't proving your point. It's refusing to negotiate your worth. There is something sacred in the way a man closes a door without needing applause for doing it. Not slamming, not slinking, just closing. That kind of act marks him. It shows a woman that she was standing next to a man who didn't need to win. He just needed to walk. And she remembers. She remembers in fragments, in flashes, in midnight sobs and daylight rewrites. She says you ghosted. But she knows that's not what happened. Ghosting is what cowards do. You didn't ghost. You outgrew. You evolved. She didn't see it happening because she was too focused on whether or not you were still orbiting her mood. But you stopped revolving around her emotions the moment you realized your peace wasn't worth trading anymore. And the moment a man realizes that, he becomes unforgettable. Because now every man after you bends, he explains, he yields, he makes himself small to keep her comfortable. And every time they do, she thinks of you, of the man who never begged, never softened, never tried to sell his pain for a few drops of her attention. She won't say it out loud, but deep down, she misses the feeling of being near something she couldn't fully own. That's the paradox of the feminine mind. She craves intimacy, but she respects mystery. She says she wants transparency, but the moment you give it all away, she feels nothing left to seek. And once there's nothing to seek, there's nothing to feel. You gave her the gift of never being solved. She'll hate it. She'll crave it. She'll replay it. You're the unsent message, the unfinished chapter, the silence that grew teeth. And now, she checks the mirror with different eyes. Eyes that carry regret. Eyes that no longer look for explanations, but for signs. Signs that maybe, somewhere, you still think of her. Signs that maybe the man who didn't explain is still watching, still waiting, still open to one more conversation. But you're not. You're gone. And that's what carves the story so deep in her memory. You didn't leave like a man hoping she'd notice. You left like a man who knew she eventually would.